Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the AP Automation with CloudOCR and OnBase. We will have a presentation beginning real soon. We'll give just a few more minutes for people to join, but be ready for questions. Get those questions ready for us. We'll hit the ground running pretty soon. Okay, I just got the thumbs up that we're ready to rock and roll, so let's do this. Thank you again, everyone, for attending. Today, we're going to have some presentations for you and show you a little bit about CloudOCR, the best known OCR service that's available to anyone out there. It's so easy to use that you're going to be just in awe of how this works. Today, we're going to have some presentations. My name is Jack Roberts, the founder of TSC. On the line, we'll also have Jack Pompey, who is fielding your questions and will be asking those on your behalf and taking down any notes. And then we round it out with Jack Shales from CloudOCR. So we're going to rename this to Jacks Are Better and not AP Automation because we think that's cool. But with that being said, we'll just go through the agenda really quick and talk about who TSC is. We were founded in 2011, and we focus on enterprise content management. We really strive to be a customer service company and put the customers first. That is our main objective. And we'd like to say we have a specialty in enterprise content management. One of the team members that joins us, when they do, they have to have a minimum of 10 years of experience with working with OnBase and related technologies. Most of our staff on the tech side have over 20 years. And on that 10-year side, that goes for our sales team as well. So you're going to get somebody that's got a lot of experience and seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I won't read all these slides to you, or all these bullets on the slide, but just know that we have a lot of experience and we take each new problem and build that solution for each one of you and not just try to do a cookie cutter solution. One of our customer quotes is out here just to show how great it's been to work with TSC. We didn't have to pay her to say that or anything. So thank you, Miss Lindsay Anderson from Regional Medical Imaging. Here's our agenda today. Jack Shales is going to talk about CloudOCR and automating invoice capture. Then it'll be switched back over to myself, Jack Roberts, and we'll talk about three-way matching, approval workflows in OnBase, key integrations for OnBase, and then wrap it up with questions and answers. At any given time, if you have a question, please use the question and comment box that you're having go to webinar and feel free to ask any questions. Okay. Jack Shales, are you ready, sir?
I am.
Awesome.
All right, so you should be seeing my screen in just a moment. Basically what I've done today is just put together kind of the most important pieces of what CloudOCR is and just trying to give you as much as I can to illustrate what the experience of working with CloudOCR is like. So for the first bit of this, we're just going to go over some kind of high-level information on what is CloudOCR, what does it do, how does it do it, and then we're going to go into the portal, which is kind of where you'll be interacting with CloudOCR. But kind of as you'll realize during this presentation is that CloudOCR is basically hands-off. Essentially, just to give you kind of the spoilers for the end of the movie, you put in, the document or the invoice in this case. It goes through the processing. You don't have to sit there and watch it process, but basically the first time you're going to see it, it's already going to be indexed and have some level of verification as well, so that you're getting the highest quality data possible when it comes out the other end. So CloudOCR is a product that was developed in the last 5 years, and really what CloudOCR is a response to all of the difficulties that we've had over the years of dealing with and managing and implementing different OCR solutions that have their own positives and negatives. So Back in the past, when you would go out and get an OCR system, maybe 20, 25 years ago, even 10 years ago, you can still buy these today. It was heavily template based. You'd have to know exactly where on the document you wanted to capture certain fields. And if the scan was just a little bit off, if they changed the format of the documents that were being sent to you, that could lead to a lot of failures. So that zonal capture is really great for things like government forms that never change. It's not so good when we're talking about invoices, when each invoice from each of your several thousand vendors could be slightly different from one another. So luckily, within the last 10 odd years, there is more of a dynamic approach to OCR, meaning that we're not as tied to those templates. That information can be anywhere on the page, and we're using things like natural language processing and machine learning to automatically find the important fields on the documents, even if they are slightly off from one vendor to another, one scan to another. So we develop one profile. We don't have to develop a template for every one of these vendors. However, even in those dynamic OCR systems, it basically requires a full-time effort, possibly multiple people, to manage the care and feeding of that software. Any machine learning based technology is going to typically reach a point where you get kind of the optimal results, and then it goes down over time, because if you have turnover, and someone comes in and doesn't know exactly what they're doing, that can lead to a lot of mistraining of that engine. And so over time with those, you see kind of those diminishing returns, and you find yourself just kind of constantly, again, managing the care and feeding of the software, where, when you go into this concept of getting an OCR product, typically what you really want is just to capture the data easily off the page with as little manual effort as possible. And that's really where CloudOCR comes in. So at a high level, CloudOCR is going to do three main things. It's going to be able to capture all of the information on the page. From that information, using that machine learning, it's going to index the document. And then one of the additional services that CloudOCR provides is the validation of that data by human verifiers. So that's really important, because in what I just described, where you go out and purchase your own dynamic OCR product and you're kind of managing that infrastructure, you're standing up the servers, you're training the engine, and you're kind of watching for failures so that you can correct them. That's typically people on your side that will be doing those corrections, training the engines, developing new profiles. With CloudOCR, that is all provided as a service. So your only interaction with CloudOCR is going to be allowing your emails to flow in automatically. Maybe you're scanning into a folder, but then again, at that point, you can check in on the status in the portal. You can always see a breakdown of where your batches are at in the CloudOCR process, but you are not having to go in and make those corrections yourself. Again, the first time that you're going to see those documents come out the other end, they are going to be fully indexed for you. So with this new technology that CloudOCR has and this new approach to OCR, because we're not having to stand up servers from scratch and install complicated machine learning software, it's already up there in the cloud. It's rapidly deployable, because really we just need to make that connection between your on-base system and CloudOCR for things coming out, and then manage the emails or the scans that are coming in. That's really it when we talk about rapidly deployable. It eliminates manual touch points, because you're not having to manually key in the data, but you're also not having to make those small corrections where if the OCR reads something incorrectly, typically you'd have to have someone on your side going in and correcting those mistakes. You don't have to do that anymore, because CloudOCR provides that as a service. It's flexible and scalable. We have some customers that are using CloudOCR that have maybe around 500 invoices per month or less that are using CloudOCR. And we have some that are putting through millions of documents a year. So it truly is a solution that can work for any size organization and any size need. And then also what you'll see towards the end of my presentation is the capability to have complete visibility with our reporting mechanisms, and also the ability to, you know, just do that kind of management of who can see your reports. There's a questionnaire where you can kind of put in some of your standards and practices, things that make processing your invoices a little bit unique. And because CloudOCR provides that human element as a service, we can be a little bit more granular in the way that we treat one customer to another. So, you know, some customers have very different rules from another customer, and really especially when we're talking about accounts payable departments, the thing that's consistent is no two department really ever does it the same, and we know that. So we're going to really focus on invoices for this presentation, but we'll kind of talk a little bit more about, you know, the possibility of different document types in a bit. So with CloudOCR, it all starts with an invoice. So again, this invoice could be sitting in your email inbox, a vendor sends it to you, and you can automatically forward that invoice into CloudOCR. It can come in through the traditional mail. You take it, scan it, and then, you know, the location that you scan it automatically picks it up and gets sent to CloudOCR. You even have possibilities of documents kind of starting in OnBase and then going up to CloudOCR via API. So there are, at this point, many, many different ways to get your invoices into CloudOCR, but basically we're going to make it as hands-free and painless as possible. So once that invoice gets swept away and kind of goes into CloudOCR, we like to say that it really is chaos solved with a single solution. So just think about, you know, all of the steps where if you're using no OCR, if you're just manually typing everything, it might have to go to different folks that handle certain cases. You might have to do some of that pre-sorting. If you're scanning everything into your system manually, you might have to be putting in separator sheets and organizing things prior to scan. Really, CloudOCR thrives on that chaos at the front end, and it doesn't bother us at all. So really, you can send in those invoices however they're coming in. That's why we feel 100% comfortable saying however those invoices are coming in from your vendors, you can just automatically forward them into CloudOCR and just let us deal with all of those weird things that they might do. Like, you know, have several attachments that have nothing to do with that invoice. That's fine. CloudOCR is going to handle that kind of thing. Again, the document separation, you don't have to worry about separating beforehand because that's part of the service that CloudOCR is going to provide. And of course, you don't have to worry about the quality of the scan. It can look, you know, completely fuzzy as long as with the human eye as a last resort, we can somehow make out the characters on that document. It has a chance to go into CloudOCR and come out the other side accurately indexed. So at a high level, what does this process look like? When that invoice goes into CloudOCR, it's going to go through 3 basic steps. The first one is classification. And in that classification step, we are doing the automatic splitting of documents. So if your vendor sends you 50 invoices in a single PDF, don't worry about it. CloudOCR is going to break that up in the classification step. Additionally, during that classification step, we're optimizing the potential for the speed of capture and the accuracy because we're identifying pages that we're actually going to capture that critical data off of and pages that we do not need to capture data off of. And what that means is that, you know, maybe you get an invoice and the front page has all of that pertinent information, like the invoice number, the invoice date, the total amount, etc. But then the succeeding 7 pages are just terms and conditions that we don't need to capture anything off of. So that's another thing that that classification step is doing, is basically optimizing it so that when it goes through data capture, it's much more targeted and that is also going to increase the accuracy. So after we have those properly separated documents and we've identified those attachment pages that we don't need to capture things off of, it goes into data capture. And what that means is that we're leveraging that machine learning technology to automatically index as much as the CloudOCR engine can. And so a lot of times it'll get everything 100% correct, especially if you have vendors that send you really clean and clear invoices. It'll do a great job, but that's not the state in which we pass those invoices back, right? It goes through that data capture step. Typically we'll get, let's say 95% in that data capture step will be completely accurate, but then everything is going to go through that last layer of verification where a human is going to be looking for low-hanging fruit errors, like the OCR picked up a 0 instead of an O, picked up an I instead of a 1. So those types of things can happen with any OCR engine, but in that verification step, we can catch those things and correct them before we pass them back to you. Another thing that's happening in the verification step is if our engine is picking up a field incorrectly, we're also training the OCR engine to pick it up more successfully next time. So an example of that is maybe an invoice comes in the first time and it picks up a PO box out of the address instead of a PO number. So that verifier is going to retrain the system and point it to the correct field so that in the future they're not having to do that correction. And again, that care and feeding of kind of teaching that machine learning engine to do better and better next time, CloudOCR is providing that as a service so that in the future, your experience is really you send in an invoice and you get it back quicker. And that's because of all of that effort in the verification step. And then one more thing that verifier can do for you is, let's say you've got an invoice that comes in and somebody has completely crossed out the invoice number and written another one in by hand. And the one that's written in by hand is the one that you need to capture. That's something that's going to fail any OCR engine 100% of the time. But in this case, since we have that verification step, on our side, we will key that in for you so that, again, you just have the most accurate data possible. So CloudOCR at the end of the day is really a best of breed combination of that machine learning dynamic OCR technology, as well as that human element that just lets us push those accuracy results over the top. But from your perspective and your experience, you're really just sending in those invoices and getting back the most accurate data possible. So you're going to spend a lot less time manually keying in that invoice data because, again, even if something is tricky for the OCR, we have a safety net for that in that verification step. You're going to spend a lot less time managing difficult capture software because really your only direct interaction with CloudOCR is seeing the result and then going into the portal. And, if you're just wondering where a certain batch is, you'll always have visibility into that sort of thing. And again, the first time your team sees the invoice, like let's assume that you're doing that auto forwarding out of your email inbox. After it leaves that inbox, the first time you're going to see it, it's already indexed and has gone through that layer of human verification so that you can be sure that what comes from CloudOCR is accurate as far as what is printed on the invoice. Now, is the vendor, printing things correctly on the invoice? That's how you'll, when we get to the workflow step, that's where you'll determine if they're making errors themselves. But with CloudOCR, we will capture what's on the page using kind of those 3 steps, and we've had really good results with that. So again, at a high level, before we go into the portal, I just want to kind of go over that process in more detail here. So at the beginning, you email or scan those invoices. They go automatically into CloudOCR at the API level. encrypted at rest and in transit. Then they go through that classification step, which, remember, that's where we can automatically break apart documents, and we're also identifying critical pages and attachment pages. After that, the index extraction process is that automated machine learning capture that you're used to if you have dealt with any of these types of OCR systems before. But the difference is, instead of your team going in and making those corrections and having to retrain the system if it picks up something incorrectly, we are doing that for you with our CloudOCR professionals. So that is the layer of human interaction that we place after that automated capture that's going to push your accuracy results well above what you would get in a system without that service. And again, upgrades, you don't really have to worry about them. You don't have to worry about standing up new servers. Really, the only thing that you're going to need to install is a little utility that picks things up that you send to a folder and gives them back. And with the TSC team helping you with the on-base integration side, you really won't have to worry about basically any of that. So once you set it, you can pretty much forget it. And again, you put in the invoices. At the end, you get the indexed invoices. So the simplicity and the lack of manual effort is really what sets CloudOCR apart from other capture technologies. So with that, I am going to get right into a look at the portal and kind of what you would be seeing if you are using CloudOCR. So if you can see my portal over here, this is kind of our home page. So a couple of things right at the top, you can see a button to create a support ticket. So if you have a question for the CloudOCR team on why something is getting captured the way it is, or if you just want to, say, hey, this particular field on this invoice, it's not obvious, but it needs to be this, you'll always have that ability to communicate. You'll also get in touch with the correct people from the CloudOCR side, and of course the TS team will help you with that chain of command. So you'll understand fully how to kind of interact, but it is a very interactive process. So when you get set up, there will be a little bit of question and answer that we'll go through to make sure that we're capturing things in the way that you want them to. But then after that, again, it becomes basically hands-free, and that's where you can just use the portal to kind of do that baseline reporting. You can see things on a week-to-week basis. You can look at the monthly total, and all of that is going to be expressed on this homepage in these dashboards. So you can select the time range. If you just come in here fresh, it'll default to the current day. But again, you can kind of use this time range filter in order to, look at the full year, whatever you want to do. There's a couple of graphical elements up here at the top. There is the total amount of files that you've uploaded that have been processed versus the amount that you've uploaded that are kind of still going through the CloudOCR process. So if we're assuming that we're just looking at today, I've got 22 that I've sent up and have come back to me, and I've got 6 invoices that are still being processed in CloudOCR. On the right-hand side, for my time range, you can see basically the licenses that those consumed. And so basically what that means is for every page of data that we're capturing, so an invoice comes in and it's a 1-page invoice, we capture data off of it and return it to you. That's basically 1 license consumed, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. But also we're letting you know if you got one of those 20-page invoices, but we're only capturing data off the first page, you'll also see the amount of attachment pages that basically we were able to ignore. And so you can kind of see that full breakdown here. Going down the page, you'll get more of a line item breakdown of all of that information by batch. So we kind of have best practices on what's the best batch size, and obviously there will be work in determining what's the best way to get invoices in and get invoices out of CloudOCR. But if you're using multiple different methods, if you're using email, API, or our secure management tool, which is basically the scan to a folder type integration, you'll be able to filter by any of those methods so that you can, see them in a more filtered view. And then also, and something we'll talk about later is that if you've got different types of documents and not just invoices, you'll be able to also filter on document type. There's also the ability to filter on batch status. So just to look at the different statuses, basically what that looks like is when you send an invoice into CloudOCR, it'll be in an open state, and then it'll get picked up by OCR, then it'll be in this OCR state. Then when it goes into verification, that means it's gone through that data capture and someone is basically looking at it for those manual corrections or retraining of the engine. Once it's been processed, it's basically just waiting to get resubmitted into your on-base workflow. And then once it's downloaded, that means you should have received it. It should be sitting there fully indexed and verified and waiting for you. So at the bottom, you can kind of see for each batch, you'll get a unique batch ID. So if you need to talk about a certain batch with TSC or with CloudOCR staff, you can reference that unique batch ID. You'll have a time and date stamp of when that batch was created inside of CloudOCR. You'll be able to see the status of that batch. You'll be able to see what type of document it is. So you'll see a lot of invoices here. That's kind of the main bread and butter, but there are others. And then the method with which you sent the invoices into CloudOCR. So secure management tool, email, or API. And then you can see the breakdown of the total amount of files you put in versus the amount of pages that were in that file. And then you've got the total amount of downloaded files as well. And so you can see the full breakdown of what you put in versus what you got out. And all of that will be very clear. You'll have all the information you need right from this front page. So now if I go down to the left-hand side, you can see there's some other things that you can do in the portal. One of the things that is part of the CloudOCR process is uploading a vendor file. This is something that TSC is going to help you with on how to format and how to kind of automate that as much as possible. But basically, we take a snapshot of your vendor list, and the critical things are we want the vendor ID so that you can spur automation once it hits the workflow. We already know that unique vendor identifier so that you don't have to input that manually after the fact. We have the vendor name as it is in your ERP, and then we also have a vendor address that's typically useful for us being able to do that first time identification of that vendor. So when we get an invoice into CloudOCR and we take a look at the combination of the vendor name and the vendor address, we try to find a match in the vendor file that you've sent. And basically, we will map it appropriately so that in the future, after that first time, it'll just start to automatically identify those vendors on our end. Of course, you don't need to be worried about that at all, just a little behind the scenes. And then basically, there's only 2 errors that you're going to be able to get back from CloudOCR. One of them is no vendor, which basically means we could not find a matching vendor in your list. So maybe they are a truly new vendor that hasn't made it into your vendor file yet. Maybe it's attempted fraud, and that's also good to recognize. Or, basically maybe it's a vendor that you just added but didn't make it into that vendor file, so it'll be identified on the next pass. This is something that when it hits something like an on-base workflow, you'll be able to kind of automatically put them in an exception queue or however you're handling that, give them a specific status. And then this cannot be processed is the other error that you can get from CloudOCR. That's basically, we don't think this is an invoice. We can't read any data off of it, even with the human eye. Or maybe it was a marketing email from a pizza restaurant and it's a pizza menu, and it's clearly not something that we need to process. So other than that, you'll always get as much information indexed as we can find on that invoice. So even if we can't find the vendor and we send it back with this no vendor tag, you will still be getting things like the invoice date, invoice number. So we'll give you as much information back as we can. We don't just stop indexing if there's no vendor. Going down the left-hand side, you have the ability to add users that you can bring into the portal and have them look at the reporting page. There's two types of users. There's an admin type that has access to everything, can even manipulate certain configurations and those sorts of things. And then there's more of a view-only user. So you can have kind of both types of users coming in. If you just want someone to be able to look at reports, that's great. You can give them the lower permissions. For your admin who is kind of managing the CloudOCR side of the house for your solution, you'd want them to have that admin access. Pretty simple. You'll always have visibility into the current amount of licenses that you have left and have consumed, but no doubt the TSC team will be in contact with you if you're approaching your limit. And it's not really something that typically gets shut off without you knowing about it beforehand. We do have a little bit of flexibility there, but again, when you're approaching that limit, you'll get notifications within the portal. You'll also definitely be receiving communications from TSC if that's the case. This settings portion, this is kind of how you can get started on processing things at a very basic level. A lot of times this will be something that's useful for just getting comfortable with CloudOCR and how it works, but the options here are by no means exhaustive as far as the different options that you have within CloudOCR. What I mean by that is, basically we have a couple of things here, like you can determine what type of profile you're capturing. So out of the box, we've got invoice, and then we've got basically a different type of invoice that's good for material haulers that deal with a lot of line items that reference ticket numbers. Don't have to worry about that. But then down below, you can see that we've got the ability to process English, Spanish, and French. We actually can process many more than that, but again, those are just kind of the most popular. So if you created an account and got a free 100 tokens to use, you could just kind of use these options in order to send things through the first time. Just see what you're getting back in a simple text file. So as you can see here, you can get the image back in a TIFF or a PDF. We do normalize everything coming out the other end, and the TSC team will give you kind of the best practices on what they need you to do and kind of the implications. And then the metadata, again, that's something that when you're looping this into your on-base solution, those answers will basically be given for you. But if you're using this for something that's not feeding into on-base and you just want to receive a text file and do something with it, you do have the option of using a CSV or an XML file. You can control the date format so that no matter how your vendors are sending you dates on the invoices, you can kind of put that into a single format before it hits on-base. And then this is where you can select the different fields that you want captured. So these are all the fields that are sort of out of the box, things like vendor name, invoice date, invoice number, but maybe you don't use PO numbers and you don't need to capture that. You can unselect it. You can see I've got account number, loan number, and subcontract number unselected. So again, those are kind of specific to if you have invoices that come in with subcontract numbers, et cetera, et cetera. So again, your best case, your kind of the best way to optimize your results is to pick only the fields that you're going to need to capture for your downstream processing. And keep in mind too that a lot of times if you capture one thing correctly with an integration to your ERP on the on-base side, you're going to be able to get a lot more accurate information than what your vendor's putting on those invoices. So you can have as many of these fields or as few as possible. It does not really affect anything on the CloudOCR side. We're used to kind of 5 fields versus 15 fields. One thing I'll say too is that, again, this is by no means exhaustive. So if there is another critical field that does not line up with these, just have the conversation and we can work with those sorts of things. There's a section on the website that basically shows you why we recommend and basically require a vendor file. It is really the best way to benefit from the automation because, again, if not, you'll really be touching every single invoice. After it hits on base, you'd have to apply a vendor to every single one unless we have that vendor information. So we do have a little help document here that gives you the format of kind of how to structure that data, but again, TSC is going to help you with that. And then down at the bottom, how are you getting the invoices into CloudOCR? Is it going to be through a secure folder through the secure management tool, where basically, anything you scan to that folder is going to get automatically sent up? Or is it going to be through email? And so if you choose this mailbox importer option, basically all you have to do is whitelist the email inboxes that you're forwarding from. So some folks will ask, does this mean that I need to whitelist every single one of my vendors? No, that's not the case. The best practice is going to be to have, AP invoices at xyzindustries.com and have vendors send things to a centralized inbox and then automatically send them out from that inbox. So you'll be managing kind of your internal buckets that vendors are sending things to, not having to put every single vendor contact. That would just get very unwieldy. Just a couple more things here. The secure management tool, this is kind of the method to get invoices to and from CloudOCR. So again, this is something that TSC will help you with, but you will have 100% control over the service account password. So you can always change that password from here. And you can also download the most current secure management tool, which again is just the method that we use to get things to and from CloudOCR. If you're using 100% email, you don't need to worry about things going in from secure management, but it can help get things back. Or again, at this point, we do have full API integration and on-base life cycles that basically do the same thing. And then finally, this questionnaire. And so this is, again, part of kind of that secret sauce of CloudOCR, where since we have that human element, we can also learn your standards and practices, and we kind of keep a frequently asked questions section for each of your companies in this questionnaire, where over the years of processing that we've done, there's some questions that come up in just about every implementation. So before, during, and after your implementation, you can revisit this questionnaire and continue to provide different answers that will help us process as efficiently as possible and get you back the information in the way that you want to. And so some examples here are this first one. Are there any cases where the vendor name in your vendor file does not match the vendor name that's on your invoice? And so this might be that they rebranded at some point. It might be that you have a legacy name inside of your vendor file, and when you're looking at every single invoice and manually indexing, that's just something that you happen to know. That's something that you could put in this questionnaire and just say, hey, XYZ company is actually ABC Corporation in the vendor file. Question 2, what should we do if there's no invoice date, or if there's more than one date? Basically, how are we going to handle that situation? So we've even had certain companies where, if there's no date on it, just use the date that it was submitted. We've had a question, if there's a question about, what do we do if there's no invoice number, if it's like a utility bill that doesn't have a traditional invoice number? You can even put in, we use this formula in order to construct one. We can use the combination of the date with the total amount and just create an invoice number on the fly. So that questionnaire is something that, again, you can kind of put in answers before your deployment, but then as different questions come up, this is something that can be added to over time, both by CloudOCR and by you, so that, again, we don't have to constantly be emailing you to ask those questions. If that answer already exists, this is kind of our first stop for addressing those issues. And so with that, that is kind of the end of what I had prepared. So I just want to pause and see if we had any questions that we can answer at this point.
A lot of really great information. Thank you, Jack. It does look like we did have a number of questions come through. First, can CloudOCR process more than just invoices?
Yeah, and this is something that I kind of referred to as I was going through, but yes, it can. Some things that we're already doing aside from invoices are bills of lading, and also proofs of delivery. So, you know, some of our customers manage kind of materials and both the inbound and the outbound exchange of materials and those sorts of things. So that's a specific, very similar to an invoice, but has its own specifics and peculiarities. And then we're also doing a pretty high volume of sales orders, as well as different types of, you know, order forms that can come in from a variety of different sources and in a variety of different, basically different qualities. So, you know, just imagine people trying to order something and filling out kind of a mostly handwritten form. A lot of that is going to fail traditional OCR, but it's something that we have done really successfully with CloudOCR. One blanket statement I'll also give is that basically any type of document that is repeatable and that has a significant enough volume is a candidate for CloudOCR. You really just need to have that discussion with the TSC team, and then they'll loop in CloudOCR and we'll talk about, you know, do we already have a profile set up for that? Or is it something where, you know, we should add that to CloudOCR? So we're always happy to kind of have that conversation.
Great, thanks, Jack. Another question that came in was, what file formats does CloudOCR support?
That's a really good question. We can take in any image file. So when you think of an image file, you know, the main examples are TIFF and PDF, but we can also take in PNG, GIF, PNG. So really anything that you can consider a true image file, it'll process out of the box. You can just allow that to kind of flow in and it'll happen. The only thing that you need to be aware of is that if your vendors are sending you Word documents or Excel files, those are the types of things that will need to be converted ahead of time. Or if you just have that one vendor that sends you a Word document, but you're only doing it maybe once a month, you're not required to send absolutely everything into CloudOCR. So you can still have those one-offs where you can enter it directly into the ERP. You can enter it directly into OnBase. So again, CloudOCR is a tool that's going to help you kind of automatically just get things indexed coming back into your workflow, but you're not required to do that for every single case.
Awesome. And then lastly, Jack, does CloudOCR have any certifications?
Yes, we do. In the last few years, we've gotten our ISO certification and we are SOC 2 compliant. So that was a really big step for us, and it's really important for the organizations that we're supporting. So thank you.
Great. And it looks like we did get another question that came in, Jack. Can CloudOCR work as a standalone, or does it have to be integrated with OnBase?
CloudOCR can work as a standalone, and I kind of referred to that before. You know, basically at its most basic level, CloudOCR can just give you back a CSV or an XML text file, and that is how you can kind of test it at the beginning. You know, you can send in a document, you can receive that XML file, and you can kind of see how your capture results are going to be even before the integration is built into the OnBase side. But I will say that CloudOCR was designed with OnBase in mind in many respects, because OnBase does so much more than CloudOCR can do from a workflow standpoint, and then, you know, being able to be that hub of integration with your ERP, with your purchasing data and those sorts of things. So really I'll say it's a beautiful marriage between the two, but it is not required. You could use CloudOCR as a standalone or potentially with another set of software.
Outstanding. Thanks, Jack.
My pleasure.
Okay, that's all the questions, correct?
Correct.
All right, let's get on over here and see what I got to show. That was great, Jack, by the way. Thank you. I always get pumped up and excited. People don't realize that if they were to go to get an advanced capture solution like this, By the time you pay for the software and the services, you're talking 6 figures easily, and then you're still going to have full-time staff verifying those invoices and doing all that lifting, and then you got to pay, like he said, for the servers and all that, and then the upgrades and stuff. That they take all that away from you. All you have to do is send them your data, and they'll give it back clean. So it's outstanding. All right, let's talk about what happens if we were integrating with OnBase. How would this work? Well, we can scan our invoices with OnBase, send them to CloudOCR, and we're going to pick up from where it came back. We're able to do three-way matches. Kind of give you an example of a workflow here, just so you can see it. But this is how it comes in, does the evaluation, and then Jack mentioned the exception queue. Here it is, right there, pretty common, that you can see anything. Maybe the vendor wasn't on file, or maybe there was other errors, but this is where it comes in for any exceptions. So we can handle that. Just to give you a once over, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but just so you can understand that we're going to check for that required data and make sure everything's there. And if there's any piece missing for any reason, maybe they didn't have it on their actual invoice itself, then we can send it over to a human to review. We're going to talk about three-way matching. So as we come in and match the PO against the package slip against the invoice, those are our 3 ways that we're going to match things. OnBase can do that for you automatically, so we can check to see the existence is there. If we have everything we need, it's below a certain threshold, or it matches the PO, it's already been approved, then we're going to go ahead and take care of that and get it into our, and post it into our actual ERP. You'll watch and see that the PO totals, they have to match with the invoice total with or without shipping. You can allow some variances there inside of this, so that if you said, okay, the time I created the PO, I don't necessarily know what the shipping is going to be, and you can say, okay, I'm allowed for a 2 or 3% differential for tax and or shipping. So you can have a certain range there. If it exceeds that, then it needs to be reviewed again. All kinds of options that are out there for you. We talk about any values exceeding the limit that a AP clerk may have. We can route those around and get multiple approvals, so it does actually go through and get approvals. And if it's a non-PO, like a utility bill, then we can also send that through and process it. So we have one method of capturing all your invoices and bills and send those through and allow that workflow to help you and automate as much as possible. To kind of give you an example of what the screen looks like, when we come in, we're talking about those missing for the exceptions. We do the three-way match. Well, here, look at this. We're ready to be in the line item match and push this over, but I can see from a quick glance on my related documents that we're missing the packing slip. So in this case, it failed the three-way, but maybe we don't have an actual packing slip that's required for this one. Maybe this is just software, so there's no actual packing slip to have with it. These are the kind of exceptions that you got to think about and build out. So we start talking about approval with OnBase. Here we're looking at the inbox for my queues that I have access to, and I then have the invoices here that I'm assigned for. But you're going to have all kinds of options to work with these. But at this area is your ad hoc tasks. This is where the human interaction with this, and they can display and they can split this out into different things they want. You can submit for approval. As you can see, you have a plethora of options, and these are all configurable for what you need in your business. This is just examples of what's out there. So to give you a once over the whole workflow features, we can talk about approval limits. A lot of times we're going to have an approval limit of say $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. Anything above that has to go to VP level. Maybe if it's over $150,000, it has to go to the CFO and the CEO to get multiple approval sign-offs. So you have all kinds of things. Load balance queues. As you saw, there were many queues in the workflow. It's easy enough to set this up, and we can do a round robin to these different information or different AP clerks, or we can even set it up so the clerks can manage things like vendors A through D and so on. As we go through, we're going to do those checking for related documents like we talked about for the PO and packing slip if it's in OnBase. It's nice to have a split screen and do different things, but the big thing that people like is checking for duplicate invoices. OnBase can check for that, and you can't just go off of invoice number because 2 different vendors may send in an invoice with the same number. So you need to check on multiple items there. We'll quickly go into some of the key integrations. JD Edwards by Oracle is pretty popular. Everybody knows it's out there and how to use it. You're able to do a lot of different stuff with the integration that Highland has for OnBase into JD Edwards. And these are connectors that work bidirectional that we mentioned, but I'm going to show you a series of several of these that are out there that are already connectors are there. We just need to configure them and you're off and running. This is an example of what it might look like if I was in JD Edwards and I can see that we have the screen up, and then I can actually click on this where you'll see there's a blue button here that says view supplier invoices. That's actually going to tell us that we can click there and it actually talks to OnBase, brings back that invoice. And for all intents purposes, the person that's running JD Edwards has no idea that they're in OnBase. SAP, been around for a very long time, and people like to use this and use the archive link and different things. We had a recent webinar on SAP SuccessFactors for the HR side, but on the AP side, we can use archive link and pass information back and forth. Another example of how this could work is with SAP and even any of your ERP systems that we're talking about. This is an example of a work view screen where we're capturing all the details from our ERP, or we're using, if we don't have the ability to have a big high dollar ERP, we can use OnBase to capture all of our vendor information and all the different info about the actual invoice and all the line items here. So we're going to go through and let OnBase do all this. And once we have everything approved inside of OnBase, the next step will actually post to SAP. As we'll see, this gets you into further. I can have different codes. I can break things out into different cost centers. There's an example of your PO even that came across from SAP so that we can process this. This just kind of gives you into the SAP screen so you can see that a little bit. Workday, a big up and coming solution that a lot of people are transitioning to. Highland does have a Workday certified solution integration. So it's great that you can go out and have a true bidirectional certified solution that's there. That's the key, is certified. There's only 2 different vendors that are certified with Workday with respect to invoice processing, and Highland is the main one. So an example of another situation where we have our invoice data, we've captured it, and we're storing it all here in OnBase so we can then post it to Workday. And then when we get into Workday, we can simply see that, yep, here's my document link right into Workday. So it's using, if you're familiar with OnBase, the doc pop, and it can go out and pull your invoice right from OnBase and display it. Then you have the full functionality of OnBase where you could capture the history, send it out. If you need to do even approvals from here. So if I'm in this process and I need additional approval, you can see and do any approvals from there as well with workflow. There it is. And Microsoft Dynamics, this is another option that we're seeing more and more for the mid-sized businesses that are out there. We're able to interact with Microsoft 365 Dynamics and do different things. Again, as you can see, most commonly we're getting this over and over again where we're collecting all the data. And if you were to imagine all these as keywords and all this different stuff in OnBase, you're going to have a couple hundred keywords per document. So this is why the nice part about using WorkView in addition to Workflow and CloudOCR is now you're able to have a one-stop shop and come in here to OnBase. Your invoices will flow in via mailbox importer, or you'll scan them in, goes to CloudOCR, comes back. We're going to capture all this data. One of the cool things about CloudOCR is not only can it capture the header information like invoice number, date, and time, it can also do line items. So that's a lot of time taken away from somebody to actually key those in and match them to a PO. So as we go through, here's Dynamics for example, and then we can see that we start pulling up our invoices to have those, and then we can launch one of those invoices, put in the amount, and then here's my OnBase document, direct integration right there, so I can see the invoice come up. Okay, last one we're going to chat about real quick is the Infor, the cloud suite they have. A lot of people will know there's different flavors of this. They do have their Lawson integration that we can do, but we have a bidirectional communication with this, and we're going to use that quite often when we talk about processing invoices. Right there inside of your payable solution, you can see another open OnBase, and that's going to open our file up from OnBase, and we can see it. For those of you that are out there that are unaware, the ShareBase application by Highland will be going away as of June 2024, but they've introduced a new portal solution. We find this very, very intriguing because this portal solution now gives us the ability to not only have data passed back and forth with our vendors, but we can also set this up to be accepting credit card payments. So on the AR side, you can flip this around and do different things with it. We'll have another presentation on that potentially later this year, but just want to make sure everybody's aware that this is a new feature, that this part will replace ShareBase. Okay, ran through that really, really quickly. We'll open up Jack Pompey. Did you have any questions?
Really great job, Jack. Yes, it does look like we had some new questions come in for both CloudOCR and OnBase. First, Jack, you had mentioned the OnBase integration with SAP. Is that an out-of-the-box solution, or is that a custom code every time?
So that it is a actual connector that works with SAP. There's minor configuration that has to be done. Highland's already done the heavy lifting, so they've done all the hard coding in the background. So now it's available that we can come in and talk to SAP via a GUI interface and just configure it.
Great. Looks like we had another question came in. Says our AP clerks are remote. Would we still be able to use OnBase if we want to utilize the workflows?
Absolutely. A lot of our workforce is going remote, and we know that. OnBase Unity client can work in a remote location, as well as you can use the web client. Everything we've shown today works with web and Unity.
Outstanding. Another question, Jack, that came in is, we have a rather complex approval process. Who can we talk to discuss that in more detail?
Good question. We encourage you to reach out to your respective partner or TSC, and we can talk through that. Basically, any approval process that you may have, we're going to mimic that in OnBase. And the first thing we do is do some discoveries with you to understand what your business requirements are, what are your current processes, and then we'll follow it up with, okay, here's the proposed solution with OnBase, and show you the efficiencies gained and how we can take a lot of these steps out, human steps, I should say, and automate this process even more.
Awesome. And then it looks like we do have a couple of quick questions regarding CloudOCR. First, I'm concerned about having too many vendors. My company has over 10,000. Is this too many?
The short answer is no. That's not too many, and that is more, what we see on a consistent basis than something abnormal. So we haven't had a number that has shocked us yet, and we are able to work with, many, many times more than that 10,000 number. So if you have a concern, you can definitely ask us, but it has not been an issue so far. And again, we do have certain very high volume customers using it with no issue.
Great. And then Jack, a similar question is, we only process about 100 invoices a week. Is this too low for CloudOCR?
Absolutely not. And I would say that that kind of goes right into the sweet spot on when you'll start, seeing a real benefit to it. So even at 100 a week, depending on your staffing situation, it can be fairly unmanageable, and dedicating resources to just that manual indexing, at that level, you will see a big benefit when using CloudOCR.
Nice. Great. And then lastly, does CloudOCR work with Highland Cloud, or do we have to be on-prem?
We have customers on-prem and in the cloud. So luckily we have kicked the tires enough in the last couple of years where we're fully confident in both situations, or even if you're using, some other cloud that's not the Highland Cloud. So I think that we're ready for all scenarios.
Great, thanks, Jack. It looks like that does wrap us up with questions.
Awesome. Thank you both. Okay, just 2 more slides and we'll be done. We encourage you, if you have OnBase and you're interested and you don't have the ability to have a full-time staff member dedicated to OnBase, reach out to us. Ask us about our OnBase managed services and what we can do for you. We have the expertise. We're here. We're in this all day, every day. Sometimes you just don't have the bandwidth to handle that. Reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you about it. And the last thing I want to say is thank you all for coming today. We appreciate you. If you have any topics you would like to see covered in the future, please email salesadmin@tsc-ecm.com. But I would like to say our next webinar on exploring OnBase will be contract management. That'll be coming up in September, where you can see what it would look like to actually manage your contracts inside of an on-base solution. Okay, thank you everyone attending today. If you have any questions, feel free to submit those again. Otherwise, have a great day.